Neddie and Beckie, Story 13. Neddie and Fuzzy Wuzzy Tail. Come, children, it's time to get up, called Mrs. Stubtail, the bear lady, as she stood at the foot of the stairs in the cave house on the side of the green hill one morning. Come, Neddie, come, Becky. Up out of their beds in the soft brown autumn leaves jumped Neddie and Beckie. Oh, is that the professor man? Going to make us do our trick of seesawing on the elephant's back? Cried Becky, rubbing her eyes. Or maybe it's George, the tame bear, calling us, said Neddie. Then he and his sister looked at each other and they both laughed. Why, we're in our own home, exclaimed Becky, looking around. So we are, and not in the circus barn at all, added Neddie, as he noticed his own room in the cave. Then he and his sister laughed again, jumped into their little bear suits, and slid down the stair rail to breakfast. Well, isn't it good to be home again? Asked Mrs. Stubtail, as she put some more corn griddle cakes on the stove to cook. Indeed it is, said Becky. And I guess you didn't get any nice sweet maple syrup, honey like this when you ran away from home to go with the professor man and George the trick bear, did you? Asked Aunt Piffy, the fat old lady bear. Indeed we didn't, exclaimed Becky as she took another cake. And when you called us to breakfast just now, Mamma, we thought we were back in the barn again with all the circus animals. Well, what are we going to do today? Asked Neddie as he pushed back his chair, and, just as he did it, Uncle Wigwag, the old gentleman bear who was always playing tricks on the animal children, tipped Neddie over backward. Oh my, cried the bear boy. Don't be frightened, called Uncle Wigwag with a laugh. I'm not going to let you fall. And with that he caught Neddie, chair and all, up in his big paw and gave him a big bear hug. He was so glad to see his little nephew back home again. Well, I know what I'm going to do, said Becky. I'm going to give my doll, Mary Pudding Stick Clothespin, a nice bath, and put a clean dress on her, for, you see, the rubber doll had rather got messed up traveling around through the woods. I know what you are both going to do, said Mrs. Stubtail with a smile. You are both going to school. You have missed enough lessons as it is, running off the way you did. I'll not punish you, although you did give us a bad fright, but you really must go back to school. Oh dear, exclaimed Neddie, scratching his nose with his claw. That's what I say, spoke Becky. You see, she and Neddie had been out of school for nearly a week now, and it was rather hard to go back again. But they were pretty good little bear children, not too goody-goody, you know, but good enough, and so they went to school. And something happened soon after they reached their classes. Neddie talked in school. You see, the way it was, Joey Cat leaned over and asked him, Where have you been all this time? And Neddie answered back, Oh, in a circus. I'll tell you all about it at recess. The teacher heard them whispering and kept both little bear boy and the kitten chap in after school. Joey Cat got out first because he finished his punish lesson sooner than Neddie. And when Neddie Stubtail finally got out of school, there was none of the other animal boys to be seen. Every one, from Sammy Littletail the rabbit to Jimmy Whippy-Wobble the duck, and Jackie and Petey Bow Wow, the puppy dog boys, had all run off to play. Well, said Neddie, I guess I'll have to go home alone. Never mind. Maybe I'll have an adventure. An adventure, you know, is something that happens, like when you drop your candy penny down a crack in the boardwalk. Well, Neddie was walking along through the woods and wishing he could find a lollipop or maybe some honey cakes when, all of a sudden, he heard a little crying voice down under a pile of leaves, and it was such a sad, baby sort of crying voice that Neddie was not at all frightened. He just looked around to see who it was, thinking perhaps it might be Jilly Longtail, the little mouse girl. But instead he saw a big tail sticking out from under the leaves, and when Neddie had poked them away with his paw, there he saw only Wuzzy Fuzzy-tail, the tiny little fox boy. "Oh, hello, Wuzzy," cried Neddie. "What are you doing here?" I'm lost," sobbed Wuzzy Fuzzy-tail. "I'm lost, and I don't know where my home is. Boo-hoo." "Oh, never mind. Don't cry," said Neddie. "I'll take you home. Why did you hide under the leaves?" "Well," said Wuzzy, "when I heard you coming along through the woods, I didn't know who it was. I thought maybe it was a bad bear, so I hid under the leaves. Boo-hoo." "Don't cry," said Neddie again. "I'll take care of you." "Oh, boo-hoo," still sobbed Wuzzy. "Don't say boo-hoo," spoke Neddie. "Just say it backwards for a change. Say hoo-boo. Maybe that will make you stop crying." "Hoo-boo," said Wuzzy Fuzzy-tail, the little fox boy. And surely enough, when he said that, he stopped crying at once. Then Neddie took the paw of the little fox boy in his own big one, and away they went through the woods, together toward the hollow log where Wuzzy lived with his papa and mama. "I'm awful glad you found me, Neddie," said Wuzzy Fuzzy-tail to the bear boy. "I wish I could do you a favor being so kind to me." "Oh, that's all right," said Neddie, sort of careless-like. "Maybe you can someday." Well, they were going along through the woods when all of a sudden they saw right in front of them the bad old skillery-scalery alligator. "Aha!" cried the unpleasant creature with the hump nose. "At last I have you, Neddie Stubtail. And a little fox, too. Better and better. Well, I'll take the bear first, and the fox boy afterward." And with that he grabbed Neddie. "Oh dear," cried the bear boy. "Now I'm caught. This comes of being kept in after school." He tried to get away from the alligator but could not, and he felt very sad. Poor little Wuzzy did not know what to do, so he just stood there shivering and wondering who would take him home in case the alligator carried Neddie away. But foxes are very smart, even when they are small, and Wuzzy was a bright little chap, so when he saw the alligator taking Neddie away, Wuzzy said to himself, "I wonder if I can help him. He helped me, so it is only fair that I should help him. What can I do?" He thought a minute, and then he added, "Aha! I have it. I'll bite the alligator's tail. He will be so surprised, and he will give a jump, and then maybe Neddie can get away." So, going softly up behind the alligator, who did not see him, Wuzzy nipped the alligator on the little end of his tail. And Wuzzy Fuzzy-tail had very sharp teeth, let me tell you, as all foxes have. He gave the gator a good hard nip. "Ouch! Wow! Horse cars and mustard seeds!" cried the alligator, and he jumped around so suddenly to see who was biting him that he let go of Neddie. "Now's your chance, Neddie, run," cried Wuzzy. And how Neddie did run! Wuzzy ran after him, and soon they were so far away that the alligator could not catch them. Then Neddie took Wuzzy home, and Mrs. Fuzzytail thanked the bear boy very much and gave him a piece of cake. Then Neddie went home himself, and he didn't whisper in school any more that day, so that's all to this story. And tomorrow night, if the pole parrot doesn't call the poodle dog funny names and bite a hole in the firecracker, I'll tell you about Becky making a doll's dress. Story 14. Becky makes a doll's dress. "Becky, Becky, where are you?" called Neddie Stubtail, the little boy bear, one morning after breakfast. "Come along. You'll be late for school. I'm not going to wait for you." "I'm coming," answered Becky from inside the cave house on the side of the hill. "I'm coming. Wait a minute." "I'm not going to wait and be late," said Neddie, and he was not quite as polite as he might have been. "Oh, Neddie," exclaimed Aunt Piffy, the fat old lady bear, puffing and blowing, for she had been down the cellar after some potatoes, and when she came upstairs she always puffed and blew. "Why, Neddie," she went on, "you should puff. Wait for Puff, your little Puff sister. She doesn't very often puff. Ask you to puff. Do it. More times she has to puff. Wait for you." "Oh, well, I'll wait," said Neddie, and he felt the least little bit ashamed of himself for having talked that way to his sister. "But I don't want to be late," he added. "You won't be late. I'm coming," called Becky. "I just wanted to find my needle and thread." "Needle and thread!" cried Neddie. "You don't mean to tell me, do you, Becky, that you've torn your dress and have to stop and sew it, and the last bell will ring in a few minutes? Oh, I'm not going to wait any longer. I'm going." And off the little bear boy started, holding out his little stubby tail as stiff and straight as he could. But at that it wasn't much larger than your thumb, and you could hardly notice it. "No, indeed, I haven't torn my dress, and I don't have to stop and sew it," said Becky, as she came around the corner of the cave house. "Wait a minute, won't you please, Neddie? I'm just taking my needle and thread and some pieces of silk to school with me so I can make a new doll, Sarah Janet Pinklefeather, a new dress." "What? Make your doll a dress in school?" cried Neddie, stopping and turning around. "Teacher never will let you, Beckie Stubtail, never, and you know it." "Oh, but I'm not going to sew in school," said Becky sweetly. "I'm taking my lunch with me, and I'm not coming home to dinner, and I'm going to sew my doll's dress during the noon recess, and I've got some honey cakes for my lunch, too." "Oh, wow," cried Neddie. "So that's how it is, hey? Then I'm going to take my lunch, too, and stay at school and have some fun. May I have some honey cakes, Mama?" "Oh, yes, I guess so," answered Mrs. Stubtail, who, with Aunt Piffy, had come to the door to see the children start for school. Then Neddie ran back to get his lunch put up, and such a busy time as there was. For a few minutes Mrs. Stubtail and Aunt Piffy both tried to put the lunch up so Neddie would not be late, and Mrs. Stubtail dropped the bread butter side down, and Aunt Piffy lost her breath and could hardly find it again. Then Uncle Wigwag, the bear gentleman, who was always playing tricks, sat down in the flypaper by mistake, and Mr. Whitewash, the polar bear gentleman had to pull the sticky stuff off his friend Uncle Wigwag. And that wasn't all, for Mr. Whitewash was shaving his whiskers, and when he wasn't looking, Mrs. Stubtail knocked over the molasses pitcher into his cup full of soap suds lather, and when Mr. Whitewash went to lather his face again, he was almost as badly stuck up as Uncle Wigwag was with the flypaper. Oh my, such goings on. But finally Neddie's lunch was put up, and all this while Becky waited for him, and she never once said, "Hurry up, or I'm going on, we'll be late." Not once did she say, though she might well have done so since the last bell had been ringing for some time. But finally Becky and Neddie got to school, and they were only about 1/40 part of a second late, and that didn't count. I wish I could tell you all that happened in school that day, how Neddie went to the blackboard and wrote a fine story of Poodle Dog that could stand on its head, and how Joey Cat drew such a real-like picture of a mouse that Tommy Cat, Joey's brother, wanted to chase it, and it was all his sister's kitty cat could do to stop him. But I haven't room to tell you any of those things now. I must tell you about Becky making her doll's dress. Now, hold on, boys, if you please. You might think this is a girl's story, but it isn't. This is not at all, even if it is partly about a doll's dress. If you just listen, you'll see that Becky did a very brave thing, which shows you that girls can do things as well as boys can, and lots of times better. Take, for instance, braiding hair. A boy couldn't braid his hair to save him, but look how easily a girl can do it, and chew gum, and read a book, and talk, all at the same time. Well, I guess. Anyhow, pretty soon it was recess time, and all the animal children could come out of school. Some went home to their dinner, and others, who had brought their lunch, found nice cozy places where they could eat. Neddie went off with Tommy and Joey Cat, and with Jackie and Petey Bow Wow, the puppy dog boys. And as soon as Becky had finished her lunch, she got out her needle and thread and thimble and the pieces of silk, and began to make a dress for her doll, Sarah Janet Picklefeather. First, she sewed in some tuckers, I think they're called, or maybe it was puckers. Anyhow, she sewed them in the dress, Becky did, to make it look nice. Then, the little bear girl made a few frills around the neck, and down the side she sewed in some rosettes. Around the middle she gathered some insertions, and then on the bottom, let me see now, what did she put on the bottom? Oh, I know, it was a ruffle. You boys may skip this part if you like. I wouldn't write it, only I have to put in something about the dress, or the girls won't read the story. Where were we? Oh, I remember. We'd gotten to the bottom part of the dress, and that reminds me, if we're at the bottom of the dress, that's all there is to it, and I can stop. And so, I'm at the end of that part, and don't have to write any more, thank goodness. Anyhow, Becky was sitting on the steps of the school in the warm sunshine, sewing away on Miss Picklefeather's dress, making her needle go in and out, when, all of a sudden, along came a bad old big bear, who didn't like little bear girls nor bear boys either. "Aha," growled the bear, "this is the time I have caught you. I've been waiting a long time to get you. Now I'm going to carry you off to my den, and make you wash dishes forever and ever. Brrr." Becky looked up quickly and started to run, but she had no chance. The bad bear was right in front of her, and the door before which she was sitting was one that was hardly ever used, so it had been locked. Becky couldn't escape that way. She looked all around the schoolyard, but none of her friends was in sight. Neither was Neddie, who might have saved her, and as for the teacher, she had gone home to her dinner. "Oh, help, help," cried poor little Becky. She didn't want the bear to take her away, and as for washing dishes, she just hated that work, though she didn't mind doing them for her mamma. "Pooh, no one will help you," cried the bad bear, "so don't bother to call. Come along." And he reached out his paw to grab Becky. Then he happened to notice the doll's dress, and, being a very curious sort of bear, he asked, "What are you doing?" "I'm making a dress for my doll," answered Becky as politely as she could. With all the trembling, then she thought of a trick to play on that bear. "Would you like to see me sew on the doll's dress?" Becky asked sweetly. "Well, you might show me 1 or 2 stitches," said the bear sort of careless-like. "But mind you, I'll carry you off just the same." "All right," answered Becky. "Look closely now, you see? I put the needle in this side of the silk and push it through with my thimble." "Yes," said the bear, "I see. Now look closely," said Becky, and the bear leaned forward and put his nose and eyes close down. "And then," said Becky, "I pull my needle out this way, and I stick it in your soft and tender nose that way." And with that she did it, jabbing the needle into the bear's nose. "Oh, wow!" cried the bad bear, and he was so surprised that he turned a back somersault, and then he ran away off in the woods to get some honey to put on his sore nose. So he didn't take Becky away after all, which shows you that it's a good thing to make a doll's dress sometimes. Then, soon the other children came back to school, and so did the teacher, and the lessons went on, and everybody said Becky was very brave, and I think so too. And in the story after this, if the ash man doesn't take our furnace out in the yard so that it catches cold and can't go to the moving picture show, I'll tell you about Neddie's joke on Uncle Wigwag.